Welcome to the First Cut Podcast. I'm Rick Gehman, and this is an instant reaction pod, an emergency pod, because we just got a presser by Jay Monahan, the PGA Tour's commissioner, addressing the current crop of positive COVID-19 tests on the tour, what the plan is for this week, and what the plan is for moving forward. So to break it all down with me, it's Kyle Porter. Hey, Kyle.
How we doing, Rick? I felt like I was in that presser. We were like on cam. We were on HQ while it was happening, and it felt like I was just like staring at Monahan the whole time through a camera.
It was very official because it's the fixed cam. We had the earpieces in. It did feel like we were there. It was weird.
So I was thinking about this. What instigates an emergency podcast for us? So there's like 8 things, right? One of them's a Monahan presser.
Yes.
One of them is
Tiger does anything.
Yeah, Tiger literally does anything.
Yeah.
Probably like a 59 or 58.
Yeah.
There are not a lot of things. I guess my point is there are not a lot of things that would bring us on to do emergency pod right away. But this is definitely one of them.
Producer Jacob has another reason we would do an emergency pod.
I didn't see it.
He's on mute. Producer Jacob, you're the pro at this. You're on mute.
Next week, whenever the Ryder Cup gets canceled.
Oh yeah.
Well,
we can pre-tape that.
We should have one in the can. All right, let's talk about this because the news. So the evolution of the news this week. Cam Champ withdraws, and correct me if I get this timeline wrong. Cam Champ withdraws because he tests positive. He himself tests positive. Then, so we're recording this Wednesday afternoon on the East Coast. Brooks Koepka announces he's withdrawing because his caddy, Ricky Elliott, tested positive, which goes with GMAC, Grant McDowell, withdrawing because his caddy tests positive. That's what we know before the press conference, right?
Allegedly tested positive, because then stuff came out right before the presser. It's like, well, Ricky Elliott might have tested negative and Cam Champ might have tested negative. And I think that is the part where it's like, what's going on here? Like, what are we doing? And that's not a PGA Tour thing. That is like just the nature of this pandemic. I think, I presume. And
I would also presume, like how reliable are the tests, or if you can test positive one day or negative the next? Like, I obviously do not know anywhere near enough about it. It's why this situation is so difficult.
Have you been tested?
No, have you?
Yeah.
The nasal one?
Yeah. So the lead pastor at our church, there's some immunocompromised. It's an immunocompromised situation, and I had been around him. And I had a sore throat, and it was. I mean, if I hadn't been around him, I wouldn't have gotten tested. But I just wanted to be sure, just take every precaution. And it was a miserable experience. And the woman who tested me, she's like, "This is gonna hurt," and I was like, "Oh, great!" And she did it, and they have to do both sides. And after the first one, she was like, "That didn't feel good, did it?" And I was like, "No, but my wife had 4 kids, so I feel bad complaining about
there you go,
a nasal swab."
Yeah. Well, actually, okay. So my wife got tested. She works in healthcare, and I guess one of her patients, I guess, had it or whatever. And we did the drive-through where she was in the passenger seat, and like I could barely watch it. Like, it does not look pleasant whatsoever.
I don't know why I'm talking about that.
Anyway, so that's what we know before the press conference. So then, aboard his flight from Florida, here comes the commissioner, Jay Monahan, for this press conference. And he also tells us that Webb Simpson, out of an abundance of caution, that's a phrase you'll hear often, has withdrawn for the Travelers Championship. And Chase Koepka also has withdrawn out of an abundance of caution. You would suspect, Chase Koepka might have been hanging around Brooks, might have been hanging around Ricky Elliott. That one was very logical. The Webb one at the time was kind of out of the blue.
You know who could have used an abundance of caution, Rick? John Van de Velde on the 18th hole at the 99 Open Championship.
That could be the title of his 30 for 30, not the title of his 30 for 30.
Yeah, so the Webb thing, I saw that he had a statement. I believe it was a member of his family, somebody close to him, and yeah, I mean, and we'll get into kind of what Monahan said, but I thought the most specific thing like that he talked about was who was withdrawing, right? That was like what we learned, like the biggest takeaway or thing that we learned from him talking, and it makes you wonder, like, so we've gone from 0 to 1 to 5. Like, what the trend line here is not good, right? Like that's the part where you're like, okay, what's this going to look like for the PGA Championship in August? And you get to a point. I mean, everybody was throwing the question at him, like, what's the number? What's the number? It felt like Spieth at Birkdale. Give me a round number, Greller, right?
Yeah.
And Monahan wouldn't do it. He wouldn't give a number. But there has to be, I mean, there has to be a number, right? There is a number. I don't know if he even knows what it is, but there is a number at some point that you're just like, okay, enough people have withdrawn that this isn't a real competition. It's just it's been compromised, and so I don't know. I'm definitely worried about the next month.
I am a little bit too, especially because this quote unquote bubble, which the point that you made, this is not a bubble. Like you can't have a bubble that travels and you are constantly adding and removing people from. That's not a bubble. So we should stop calling it that. We need a new name for it.
Yeah, the NBA thing's a bubble, right? Everybody's
Right.
in Orlando. You're staying. I don't know. I haven't read the details, but you're staying at the same place. You're playing at the same place. This is it's like a hot air balloon. Like you're flying around all over the place. You're traveling, people entering and exiting, a lot of people entering and exiting. And to call it a bubble is and I don't know that the PGA Tour is really pushing that, but if you were calling it a bubble, if you were thinking of it as a bubble, that's nonsense. Like that's not what it is.
So the Travelers will go on as planned, and that's I guess that was a concern. Or it felt a lot like whatever that was, March 12th or March 15th. I was like, oh my gosh, this is trending poorly here. So Travelers will go on, but to your point, Kyle, the commissioner was pretty non-committal about the rest of the questions. He wouldn't answer the number of players that would have to test positive or the number of people that would have to test positive. He wouldn't answer anything about Memorial. Still kind of said there'll be fans at Memorial. The big takeaway for me was he was trying to hammer home the protocols that have been put in place by the tour, which they are expanding. They're going to add testing on both ends of the charter, I believe. Instructors are now moved inside the quote-unquote bubble, so they'll be tested. Fitness trailer will be brought on site so that guys don't have to leave. But to me, the takeaway was we have the protocols. You guys need to follow them.
Yeah, I've got a couple points on this. The first is that the rhetoric is, hey, we want life to go on as normal. Like we want not normal, but like we want life with like living adjacent to COVID-19 to move forward. But the problem is you're asking players, caddies, personnel to live very abnormally in every other arena so that they're able to live normally within this arena. And I don't know. Is that too much to ask? I guess not. It feels weird because it's almost like, hey guys, like the country needs this to happen. So you guys we're going to roll you out there, even though you can't, like essentially you shouldn't do anything in your day-to-day life. I mean, that's just hard. It's like, okay, so is Rory allowed to go to Whole Foods when he's at home? Like that and stuff like that. And I get it. Like they make millions of dollars. This isn't too much to ask, all these different things, but it almost feels like we're trying to do two different things here, where we're asking them to like completely not do anything at all and not be around anybody, and then come like live normally on the PGA Tour and perform for everybody. I don't know, it feels kind of weird.
It is, and I'm not torn on a lot of subjects. I usually have a side. This one is weird because, and it's weird because of the dynamic. There is no players union. These players can make any decision they want. They can show if they don't want to be there, they don't have to play. So I don't think it's too much for them to ask to be like, yo, like if this is gonna work, we have to be committed to this. If you're not committed to it, you don't have to be here. And I understand some guys like have to be there financially. Not everyone's Rory McIlroy. Not everyone's sitting on a $300 million Nike deal or whatever, right? Like, I get it. So it is weird, but the most telling part of this, the moment that I wish I remember who asked the question, ask the commissioner, do you think everyone is taking this as seriously as you do? And it was like it was a pause. He was like, that was a long telling pause that no, he does not think everyone is taking this as seriously as he thinks they should, because he even told us himself he's not taking it, or he's been lax.
Well, the photos of him dapping up Kevin Kisner and Rory on Twitter would tell me that he's been a little bit lax on it, which, look, we've all been there. Like, I have felt that in my own personal life. I think it's weird how much like you and I live very different lives than Jay Monahan and Rory and all these guys, and yet we're all experiencing some of the same things in our personal lives, which is a very strange like reality right now. But I'm glad you brought that up, because I think my biggest takeaway from the entire thing was not anything that Monahan said, not any protocol or anything that he laid out. It was the fact that he got on a plane and flew. By the way, do we have confirmation of that? And did I just see that on Twitter and it didn't actually happen? I saw it from a bunch of people, so I presume that it happened.
I'm pretty sure it did.
Okay, so he gets on a plane from Florida to Connecticut to hold this press conference when it's unnecessary. You can do the press conference from Ponte Vedra, from headquarters, right? Like it's all digital. It's not like there's anybody there, and maybe he was going up there anyway and he just bumped it up. But to me, that was the loudest thing that he said was, I'm getting on a plane and going up there because you guys can't figure this out and get it right. And to me, that's a message that press conference felt like it was for the players more than it was for anybody else.
1000% agree. I guess so. So that was the way that I feel too. I think it's a little weird, and we're all guilty of this, but like, can the excuse be we're all guilty of this, right? Like, we're 2 weeks into this, we're already lax. Like, that was, I felt when he said that, I was like, oh, look, I do it too. I was like, I get it. And you're trying to cover your butt because of the photos that came out, but like, we're 2 weeks in, like, we're not 2 years in. We're like, I don't know. Yeah. I feel like, and we've said this from the start, the tour has such a huge responsibility as like one of the first major sports organizations to do this right. And like 2 weeks in, guys, come on.
It is interesting because, even so, Tuesday was my day off, and this gets again at like the fact that we're sort of living the same lives as like Webb Simpson and these guys, like thinking about some of this stuff.
Kind of.
Well, yeah, it's I mean, it's still a little different, but Tuesday was my day off, and I went to a couple stores, and my family went to eat at a restaurant where there was like one other couple there. And we wore masks and we did all the stuff. And yet I still felt at the end of the day, I was like, man, should I be doing that? Like, is that? And so there's these little like checkpoints along the way of like checking, okay, what are you doing? Like some conviction around like what we should actually be doing. And at the end of Tuesday, I was like, I don't know. Like there are a couple of things in there I probably shouldn't have done, and I think some of this is just going to be a reality for the PGA Tour, right?
Yeah, it's certainly. I mean, everyone's fighting this, and now also the second thing, or the second biggest thing that I think came out of this was it was not. I guess it was like a threatening tone, kind of, right? Like the quote was serious repercussions, significant consequences for players that break these protocols. Obviously, the commissioner did not go into detail about what those could be. So I want to blindly speculate at how they could punish these guys. But I also want to make the point that, so the way that they have this set up, if you go through all the testing, you follow all the protocol, and you test positive, there is a stipend that the tour will provide to you if you have to go home or whatever. Which, cool. But at the same time, I bet you a lot of guys don't care about that. Like I don't know what the amount is, but it is probably not sizable enough for if people really don't want to follow protocol to care about it. So that's part of it. And then I want to talk about what could actually be done as far as repercussions.
Well, that's a good point, because if I'm Cam Champ and the tour is like, hey, you're fined, or I don't know, whatever the punishment is, I'd be like, and I also tested negative, right? So from the tour's perspective, it's like, I don't know, man, that's hard to litigate. Like, that's difficult because the testing is so apparently wonky, and there's a lot of, I don't know. It's a tricky thing. And I think, again, like, Monahan's big deal was, I mean, his entire press conference to me was just getting on the plane. And then whatever he said after that didn't really matter, because he had already made his opening statement.
It'll turn into a situation that the NFL has tried to avoid, where Roger Goodell is judge, jury, and executioner, for lack of a better term, right? Like any rule that gets broken, I'll decide what the suspension is or what the fine is. And then obviously over the years, they have said, okay, this type of infraction is 2 games. This type is 4. This is an amount of fine. So like you take out the ambiguity. But like I don't think you can do that here. So like, what if you break protocol? What if you go out to eat at a restaurant? Is that worse, or how much worse is that than going into the clubhouse while you're waiting on your COVID test result? You know what I mean? Like it's going to be so hard to figure out what punishments are.
We're gonna have the hotline where you could call in like rules. First
breaking. Of all, where is that hotline?
I don't know.
What number do you call?
I have no idea, but people are going to be like, yeah, we've got Justin Thomas in booth 5 at Red Lobster.
Applebee's. Yeah, where do you think he goes?
Yeah, I doubt Justin Thomas goes to Red Lobster. But yeah, that's tough. I think one thing you said in there about the NFL, about Roger Goodell, the PGA Tour is so unique in that all these other leagues, the commissioner is representing not the players.
No.
Right? Like
he's literally paid by the owners.
Yeah. And this is the league where the players are it's all the same. Like they're the owner and the player. And that is very unique. And I think it creates a situation. Did you see Rory entered the press conference?
No, I did not see that.
Sean Zock of golf.com tweeted it. It literally said Rory has entered the chat.
Oh my God.
And I joked with him. I said, yeah, it's for him to make sure that Monahan is following his talking points. And I was kidding, but also like Monahan's in a tough spot, because he, in a lot of ways, I don't know if this is the right terminology, but answers to the players. He has to hear from them. And it's not, he's in a weird deal where he's like managing, but also like trying to please. And I don't envy that. That's very difficult.
One of our off-season topics, when that happens in 2 years, we should talk about like how if you just blew up the tour and started fresh, like now today, like what would it look like? Would there be player unions? Would there be teams and own? Like I would like to have that exercise at some point, but we are probably 15 months out from that.
That's the PGL. You'd have team. You'd have have ownership. You'd have equity. I mean, Phil would try to buy half the league and be unsuccessful. But yeah, it would. I think it would look. I think it would look very different, to your point.
Yeah. So moving forward, we touched on this on HQ. The memorial, obviously, we weren't going to get any news about that from the commissioner today. 8,000 fans still expected to be there. I am dying to see what that looks like. Like, where do you put them? How are you going to stop 7,900 people from following Tiger's group? Like, I'm very interested in the execution of this.
Yeah, it looks like a terrible idea. I mean, I just don't know. And again, it's not like it would be one thing if it was like, man, these tournaments without fans, this is really bad, and we need to figure this out. The tournaments have been fine. They've been great. And I get it. Like, we've talked about this a number of times, financially untenable. You can't do that forever. But what's the upside there? Right? Like, I like, what's the revenue on 8,000 fans? It can't be. I mean, it's inconsequential to the tour, right? Compared to everything else that they do. It's not like or maybe they are. I haven't seen anything on the pro-am and the hospitality, the stuff that, like, the real money, like where the real money comes from. I don't know. That seems like not a very good idea for the players or for the fans. And especially if this is your trend. I mean, it's going to be fascinating to see what happens. What's next week? Rocket Mortgage, Detroit.
Yeah.
What, do we bump it up? Is it like 10 people next week? Is it, does it go back down? I don't know. I don't know. I don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah. If we keep trending in this direction and in what, 2 weeks or 3 weeks, we now let fans in, like, I don't know, man. Seems like a terrible idea, but we'll see. As we've been saying throughout this entire thing, the situation is very fluid.
I'm getting that terminology it was old during the Players Championship, much less right now.
All right. I think that'll do it. I mean, that's the emergency pod for this week. We will obviously go ahead, Kyle.
What's your number? Monahan wouldn't answer, but what is your number?
My take is there's not a number.
Okay.
Because whether you like it or not, the politics of this are heavily involved, and the reaction that people have. We knew this was coming. We knew positive tests were coming, and there was still like, oh my God, this feels like Players Championship again. What's the commissioner going to do? He's going to shut it all down. So I don't think there is a number. The number is not the number of players or people that test positive. It is like the amount of public reaction, negative public reaction. Like, that is the number. And whatever it gets to a breaking point where players don't want to be involved and a lot of the big names drop out, or like, God forbid, I like Rory McIlroy. If Rory McIlroy tests positive, we're going to have a problem. And I hate to say that that's more important to the tour than Nick Watney testing positive, but like, you're kind of kidding yourself if you don't think that.
It's a great take. And I think that the intersection of what the public perception is with golf and what the public perception is of everything is fascinating, because, I think, oh gosh, I don't know if I want to go down this road, but a lot of the demographics who follow golf, like, are less concerned, I would say, than maybe some other sports, like just of fans. And so it's hard because you're dealing with so many different arenas. You're dealing with sponsors, that matters. You're dealing with players, that definitely matters. And you're dealing with a broad fan base that, maybe some of them don't take it as seriously. I don't know. I agree with you. I think your take about it being more of a political thing than an actual number is correct. Which makes the next few weeks and months even maybe more fascinating than they already were.
Yeah, I mean, just nationally, I mean, cases are up. I mean, and even kind of, I don't want to say to the tour's credit, but not to like knock the tour. When they were planning all of this, Texas and South Carolina were quote unquote under control, and now they're hot spots. Like that's how quick all of this is changing. The national landscape of our cases is now coming back up. Like, it's going to change every couple weeks. It's all going to be about perception and politics. Quite frankly.
Did you see the quarantine thing in New York, New Jersey, and was it Connecticut?
Yeah. So 14 days from if you come in from hotspot states, right?
So if you're Spieth and you're playing the U.S. Open, I brought Spieth up even in this pod. How about that, producer Jacob? That's all time.
23-37 was
that is an all timer. If you're Spieth, you're playing the U.S. Open in September. Do you have to go up in August? Do you have to not come from Tech? I mean, this is not getting less complicated. And I've thought about this as it relates to college football. I've thought about it as it relates to the NBA, the NFL. It's I don't know. It just sucks. 2020 sucks.
It really does. Here's the dirty little secret, though. Like, in the same way that the tour can't punish you for this, Connecticut can't stop you from leaving or whatever, right? And there is going to be enough pressure for states to provide quote unquote exemptions to the tour and guys that come from the tour, because it's good for each state for the tour to get there, right? Like there is so much more to this. Like I hate to say this, but the sole focus of what is going on in the country right now is to not like have the lowest number of cases possible, because we'd all be in our homes still.
Yeah.
Like we're like the tour is not a part of that. The tour is an entertainment product, and they're getting the blessing from the places that they're traveling. The commissioner told us that today. He said we are a welcomed guest in these states. Like that's what's happening.
Yeah, it's a great point. And I think that, I think one of the hard parts is that we reset the bar. Like when everything shut down, we reset the bar, like of what was acceptable, what we were all okay with at 0. Cause it was like, okay, everything shut down. We're not okay with anything above 0. And you're like, well, that's infeasible. Like that, like everybody will just, like you said, be like, not do anything, and we'll be in our homes and people will die of starvation. I mean, not to like take it too far, but like, that's the reality of it. And so you have to as a society and even like a smaller like sports society, get your head around like what is okay. And I don't know the answer. Nobody knows the answer. And that's part of the problem here, is that like everybody has a different answer, and you're trying to deal with all those and lead a group of players on the PGA Tour into the right direction. And it's just really difficult.
Yeah, it is difficult. It is a question that we'll try to figure out over the next couple of days, weeks, months, potentially as the tour moves on. So this week we'll do Travelers Championship. We'll be here for that, and we'll be with you every round, I believe. Right, Jacob? Yeah, after every single round's reaction pod. So look forward to that. Kyle Porter, you can follow him at Kyle Porter CBS on Twitter. Thanks for joining me today, man.
Yeah, man. Hopefully Bryson will come up with the vaccine for this by the end of the year.
Probably by the end of the week, the way he's going. I'm sure I'll talk to you on HQ within the next, 5 minutes, probably. All right.
Sure.
That'll do it for us. I'm Rick Gehman at Rick Run Good. This has been The First Cut, and we'll catch you next time.